Today, we're stepping inside one of the most intense novels ever written, Heart of Darkness. But we're not just going to read it. Oh no, we're going to explore it with a kind of master key by imagining it as this vast, sprawling library of the human mind.
So just think about that for a second. What if your mind was a library? You know, every shelf is packed with the books of our civilization, our rules, our stories. But what happens when you decide to wander down into the basement, where the neat foundation meets the raw, dark earth?
Well, that is exactly what we're about to do. We are taking a tour of what we'll call the Great Library of the Void. This whole thing is our apprenticeship, really. It's a way for us to learn how to read the shadows between the lines of history, and we're using Conrad's masterpiece as our guide. So let's get started.
Okay, so here's our map for the tour. First, we're going to check out the library's crumbling architecture. That's the core themes. Then, we'll look at the shadowy artifacts on display, which are the novel's key symbols. After that, we'll open up the navigator's dossiers on the main characters, before we finally arrive at the library's, well, its haunting final lesson.
So, our first stop, the very structure of this place, its thematic foundations. See, in this library, the big ideas aren't just written in the books. They are the crumbling architecture that's either holding everything up or letting it all fall down.
And this right here perfectly sums up how the novel sees European society as a whited sepulcher. You know, a beautiful tomb that's just gleaming on the outside. The library looks grand, sure, built on these pillars of progress and civilization, but Conrad's showing us that the moral mortar is weak. The whole foundation is basically ready to crumble into a ruin.
And here they are, the actual blueprints for that decay. First up, you've got imperialism. It's sold as this noble, civilizing mission, but it's really just a pretty cover for a void of pure greed. Then there's duality, that razor-thin line that separates the so-called civilized man from the savage. And finally, the fragility of law, which shows us just how fast our rules disappear when you're far away from anyone who will enforce them.
And this really gets to the heart of it. The decay we're seeing isn't some accident. Conrad is basically arguing that the empire is a machine, and it's a machine designed to consume resources, people, even souls, not to build anything lasting. It forces you to look past all the beautiful illusions and see the predatory machine humming away underneath.
All right, so we've seen the architecture. Now let's go check out the items on display. Our next stop is the Artifacts collection, where we're going to find the powerful symbols that really anchor Marlowe's entire journey into the void. First, we have the Congo River. It's not just a body of water, of course. It's the main artery of our library. It's this winding path that doesn't just take you deeper into a continent, it takes you deeper into time itself, all the way back to the earliest beginnings of the world and to our most primal selves.
And then you have the fog. This is not just weather, right? It's a metaphysical void. It's this profound sense of moral and psychological confusion. When that fog rolls in, the lines between good and evil, between the European pilgrims and the African cannibals, it all just gets blurry. It's this feeling of atmospheric alienation.
And finally, maybe the most powerful artifact in the whole collection, Kurtz's painting. It's a blindfolded woman and she's carrying a torch. I mean, what a stunning symbol for the pure arrogance of a colonial mission that claims it's bringing light to people, all while refusing to actually see the horror it's creating. Okay, time to head into the archives of our library. We're going to examine the records of the men who tried to navigate this darkness. Let's crack open the dossiers on our two central figures, Marlowe and Kurtz.
This comparison is just so important because the heart in that story really acts like a mirror. On one hand, you've got Kurtz, the universal genius. He completely abandons society's compass and just lets himself get consumed by the irresistible fascination of having total power. He completely shatters his mirror. But Marlowe, he survives through what you could call skeptical restraint and this obsessive devotion to his work. He manages to keep his mirror intact, but the reflection he sees in it is going to haunt him for the rest of his life.
But Marlowe and Kurtz weren't out there alone. We have to talk about the foils and witnesses who are orbiting them. You've got the Russian harlequin, this clown of the void, who's just the perfect example of absurd, blind devotion to a fallen idol. And then, back in Europe, there's Kurtz's intended. She's the guardian of the facade, living in this pale light of a lie because the actual truth would be spiritually fatal.
And ultimately, what these characters show us is a really critical truth. The darkness isn't just created by men like Kurtz, it's sustained by the audience, by all the people who choose to either ignore the crime or who choose to believe the beautiful, comforting myth.
And that brings us to the final stop on our tour, the central chamber of the library. This is where its most inescapable lesson is revealed. A lesson about the darkness that's not out there, but in here. This quote just nails the novel's core message. Everything we call civilization, our laws, our morals, our society, it's all just this fragile, thin layer of wax. And right underneath it, there's a deep, dark, primal sea that can break through at any given moment. And this is why the novel is absolutely timeless. Conrad makes sure that we, the readers, can't just distance ourselves from what's happening in the Congo. Because the Heart of Darkness isn't some spot on a map, it is a permanent archive, a potential for total moral collapse that exists inside every single one of us. And so, the library's final lesson is this huge paradox. Marlowe confronts the horror, the absolute truth, in Kurtz's last words, but he can't bring himself to share it with the intended. He tells her a lie instead. And you have to ask why. It's because the raw, unfiltered truth is such a heavy burden that sometimes a comforting lie is actually what's needed to keep the world and the people in it from just sinking into total nihilism.
So that leaves us with the novel's final challenge, and it's not just for us to understand it, but to apply its lesson to our own lives. The real question is, are you willing to sit in the dark with the world's uncomfortable truths, to really listen to that whisper from the wilderness, and do it all without losing your own mind?